everybody.
Hey, what's up?
How's it going?
Good morning.
I right off the bat, he's like, I'm here for an interview. Hey, what's up? K105.
He's using his, so this is Andrew. This is my good buddy, Andrew Lantos. He's a teacher extraordinaire. He's teaching up the youth in the public school system here. Mm-hmm. And, I've known him for a while. You're a smart guy. I was telling everybody before you came in.
You've been telling everybody I'm a smart guy?
Well, it's the only compliment you're going to get in this entire thing. So let me give it to you.
Thank you.
So I know that you have like 3 or so degrees, and I believe you speak like 5 languages. Is that true?
Well, I mean, you're inflating it a little bit.
Okay.
Well, do you want me to do like a quick bio or something?
No, because your quick and my quick are very different. We don't have time for this bio.
I have 2 degrees. I went to Teachers College, Columbia University before relocating down here. Uh-huh. And I mean, my father was from Hungary. I speak Hungarian.
Hang on, because I told everybody you speak English, Hungarian, French.
Did you have to say English though? Did we know that already?
Shut up. Spanish and German.
Well, we were in Austria, so. Yeah. But I mean, Spanish and German, I don't really speak them that well. Just like I can go order things and get around.
Huh? Anyway.
Was?
But we brought you in because I think you have a very interesting perspective right now of everything going on, right? So you're a teacher. You teach in a major school system, which we're going to avoid addressing because we don't want you being labeled as like the voice of the school system. But you and I have had all these conversations, right? I have school-age kids. Mark, you have school-age kids. You teach kids. Education during COVID is super interesting, right? So
interesting is one word for it, sure.
I'm sure you have another word, right? But so, I mean, I'm interested. Take us through the first thought process last year when COVID hit.
Yep.
Like, what was your initial thought pertaining to education?
Well, when COVID hit, I mean, I think we were talking about it. Like, Rachel and I were pretty aware of it because it was hitting in Europe before here. Right. And so our friends in Vienna were like, hey, this is coming, and y'all need to take it seriously. And to be honest, my first thoughts about COVID when I was in the school, even like the week before everything shut down.
You were still physically in school?
Yeah. Okay. Like everything shut down. My last day was March 13th, 2020. Okay. So the week before that, my thoughts were completely about my safety, to be honest. I wasn't really thinking a lot about education at that point. I was more worried about I just didn't feel like they were taking it seriously. I didn't feel like people were taking it seriously. I even had to have a conversation with the principal, like just an aside, and be like, hey, what's going on here? Because I'm not really sure that the cleaning is being done. Like someone just sent a child in and they're coughing and they're like, yeah, I've been home with a fever and coughing for a few days, and they're back in my classroom. I mean, so it was all about like safety for myself and for others.
Did you think they weren't taking it serious just because people didn't really know? I mean, I remember that time. Like I remember traveling that week. I mean, March, I remember I was gone, coming back to Maryland March 14th. So I remember like traveling. I remember we had a case in New York at that time, but I still remember like being like,
it was low single digits.
And
this is not a political podcast, but the information we were getting was sporadic and skewed, right? Yeah. So I mean, first of all, who's sending their kid to school regardless of global pandemic when they're coughing and they got a fever for 3 days like that?
Amen.
There's some personal responsibility there.
But so, do you think that like people weren't taking it serious because it was more like ignorance, or do you think people weren't taking it serious because they were being dismissive of it?
Probably a little both. Okay. I mean, I think there was a lot more information coming out of Europe, and our friends seemed much better informed about it and what they were telling us. But yeah, I mean, it's a new, without going too deep into this, because like obviously I'm not a medical professional, I'm not an epidemiologist, but it's a new disease, so it's always like a work in progress. But when something's new like that, shouldn't you err on the side of cautious?
Caution, you mean?
Caution. Yeah.
5 languages, huh?
5 languages. You can't figure out the present. Use the word.
Well, you put English first. Maybe I wouldn't
have. So interesting. Okay, so COVID first hit, and I mean, so would you describe that you kind of like, so you kind of went way more on the cautious side than you thought the administration did? Is that fair to say, or no?
I was ready. I was ready to be out of the school.
You were ready to be done. Yeah.
I mean, I was ready like a week. I mean, in all fairness, like a week or two after I was ready, we were done. We were
that's
home.
true. Yeah.
So it wasn't like that long. It's not like I was there for months.
Right. And kind of like briefly, like I don't want to harp on it too much because, you know, I don't believe there's any way it can be done well. But like, just describe to us like from a teacher's point of view, the process of virtual learning. Like,
sure.
Go through like the daily routine of that, the rigor, the lack of rigor, the pluses, the minuses. Just give us a little bit of insight onto that.
Sure. So let me just go back to your original question, which was like, what was your perspective on education in COVID when this all first went down? So we stopped in-person learning March 13th of last year. And then we had a couple of weeks where we were not giving any instruction. And in fact, when we left the school building, it was kind of like, well, we might see you in a few weeks. And most of us were like, that seems pretty unlikely. But they're like, right now, we're just stopping for a few weeks and we'll reassess. And then over those next couple weeks, that's when they started rolling out this whole new curriculum style. So one of the really kind of challenging things about all this whole transition with regards to teaching is that I had been learning a new style of teaching over the past 5 years because many administrators now, they don't want like a sage on this. They say no sage on the stage. They want student-centered learning. So they want students to be actively involved. They want kind of students showing students how to do things, a lot of student modeling. So that's already a different style of teaching than maybe what I grew up with and what I had done earlier in my career.
Right.
And then when we transitioned to this at home, now it was like, okay, now we're all virtual. And it reverted very much back to like the sage on the stage.
Gotcha.
So let me know if I'm like straying too far from your original question. But it's kind of like now all of a sudden the teacher was the main focus again. And I didn't see any of my students, and many of my students, like, for how much people think these generations are like the computer generations, they're good with cell phones. And I would argue, as a computer science teacher, I would argue they're good with very limited functionality on the cell phones. Yeah. But when it comes to actually using computers and doing basics like uploading files, downloading files, installing programs virtually, like all of these things, it is a mess. And so to try to manage, like the managing of these kinds of things became like 1,000 times more challenging.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter's in 3rd grade. And so she's grown up with gadgets and technology, but there is still a certain level of, you know, she'll get to the end of the day and thinking that she submitted an assignment online, and we'll get an email from her teacher on Friday like, hey, she's missing 4 things. Well, I did it. And she's adamant that she did it. And I'm sure like sometimes, you know, she's a kid, and sometimes you know that there are these issues coming up because the school's figuring it out as we go, sort of the same way parents were at home. Do you remember any pushback initially when you all went all virtual from like parents? Was there any major issue getting everybody on board, or was it a pretty easily? I know they didn't have a choice to adapt to it, but
yeah, I don't really remember any pushback per se. Like no parents were reaching out to me and saying like, I hate this. This is horrible. But I'm not really the person that they would necessarily. They complain to me about their children's grades, or if their children are, you know, not performing well, or if, you know, there's some kind of disagreement. But no, I didn't get any pushback personally.
How, like, I know, just knowing you and like being friends with you, I know you actually spend time with your lesson plans and things like that. How different was it like preparing to teach virtually than in a classroom?
Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing. It was a massive paradigm shift. So it went from having everything planned out in classroom, and I still used paper every once in a while. You know, I would find like a lot of my lessons teaching engineering and more so engineering, it's very hands-on, project-based, and that we have materials in the classroom. So trying to figure out how to continue my thing was I wanted to try to continue to give that curriculum as much as I could, like with fidelity. But, you know, how do you get materials out, or how do you create projects with materials that are more accessible for some students to use? But it was a major paradigm shift because now everything had to be online. So they would send out like guidelines to us, and they would say, okay, every lesson should have like an intro, and they wanted to really work in SEL. SEL's become like the really big
what's SEL?
Social emotional learning.
Okay.
I mean, basically what I understand it to be is like a check-in every day, like being more human with the students instead of just being like, all right, welcome. Today's agenda is this, and you're going to have to do X, Y, Z, and this is what we're going to focus on. Let's hop right into the lesson. They wanted us to have like an opener. So like kind of like, hey, what's your favorite comic book, or which of them do you like the Marvel movies? Which Marvel movie is the best? And let's talk about that for 4 to 5 minutes, and as a sort of like check-in with the students and get them like talking about something that maybe is a little more comfortable to them. So that was a big shift that they wanted us to incorporate this SEL into each lesson. The other thing was, even though we've been using this computer system, Schoology, like a Blackboard type system where we post assignments and we post lesson folders and students submit their assignments. Even though we've been using this for years, I realized like my whole curriculum was not completely like digitalized or digitized, whichever the word is. So I realized I had to, there was a lot of work and legwork going into making sure that the lessons were all put onto this Blackboard format, and making sure that we put it on in a certain format. Like they gave a lot of like guidelines. So it would be like every lesson had to have your goals or objectives, which you normally have anyway, or like an agenda. And then it had to have like a think about it, like a discussion board type thing. It had to have a learn about it, a try it, and then a show what you know, like a little assessment. Right. So there was a lot of time. I'm sure teachers were spending a lot of time reformatting their lessons to fit into this new format, and then to digitize them.
And then, I mean, talk to us about just the students' reaction to shifting from, I mean, what I imagine, at least from I remember my school, school is as much about social interaction with your peers as it is about education. So you take that element out. How would you say the students reacted to the virtual learning experience?
It was a mixed bag. I mean, overall, the thing that I can say about this past year is very isolating for everyone involved, because normally I take pride in the fact that I learn my students' names quickly, like in the first couple weeks. And then when you're seeing them come into the classroom, you learn things about them. So it's like, oh, hey, I see you're wearing a basketball uniform. Oh, you're a basketball player. Like I can engage students on topics of interest to them just based on seeing them walk into my classroom, wearing their uniform. And you don't see the students when you teach virtually. Like they never turn on their cameras. Unless you really, unless you take that SEL time. No, you don't. They never turn on their cameras. Funny. So as a teacher, you're just staring out to a black void. Like, for example, like I pride myself on being like somewhat funny, and I try to like throw a little humor in. But I only found out from another teacher, like I was talking with another teacher about a student, and then the other teacher was like, oh yeah, that student talks to me about you all the time and says how funny you are. It's like that's the only way I knew that student thought I was funny, because they don't express that kind of stuff directly to you as a teacher. So it's very weird. It's a very weird experience. Now you asked from the perspective of the students. Right. I think some students are thriving in this. Like some students there's a lot of anxiety issues nowadays, and these students are coming in with like, oh, I'm really anxious. Like I've had students, when I ask them to present their PowerPoints, we do some research projects on like an engineering career. Right. They're like, I don't feel comfortable presenting this in front of the class.
Are you saying like this is in general pre-COVID?
Yeah. In general, I'm seeing anxiety rise.
Do you remember, like, and I'm not being funny. I know you're going to take this as me being funny.
Maybe.
I don't particularly remember when I was in grade school having those feelings or noticing those feelings amongst other people. Why do you think, I'm trying to tread very lightly here.
I can tell. You're doing great.
Why do you think that we see that so much now? Do you think that we just recognize it and acknowledge it more? Do you think that there is something else happening? Why do you think we have so much?
Are you asking me?
I'm looking around. I'm
trying
looking
to
at you to make sure I'm not getting in trouble, but I'm really asking Andrew. Like, why do you think we have so much more anxiety amongst our young students nowadays? Or am I wrong?
I think that's an appropriate question.
Okay, yeah.
Do you have an answer, Mark?
No, he doesn't have an answer. He's not our podcast guest.
Okay.
It's for you.
I have opinions, but I'm not allowed to share them.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm not like a mental health professional, so it's just my opinion here. But what I'm seeing is a shift in the way students interact. And this kind of feeds back into your original question about how are these kids handling it. Some of them are doing great online because a lot of their life was already online before this. Like they're on Snapchat or they're on TikTok. They're interacting with, I remember I had a girl who likes to sing, likes Billie Eilish, and she was like interacting with Billie Eilish online and like posting videos of her singing Billie Eilish's songs. Right. So like there's very much an online lifestyle now, and I try to have basic conversations in my computer science class about, well, there are limits to what you can do online, right? Like you can't solve racism online, maybe. I'm a little old school, I grew up in as the kids say, the 1900s. Right. They literally say that to me. I grew up in the 1900s. So I have a different idea of societal interactions. Like I don't think you could find a meaningful relationship online only.
Right.
Like at some point you have to, and I've done the online dating, you have to meet someone and see if there's like actual chemistry and compatibility IRL, right, in real life. So, but these students disagree. They disagree with me. It's all online. So some of them are really like flourishing.
Right.
Some of them who felt like pressure or were uncomfortable in like the school environment for whatever reason, they're doing well online. Right. But some of them are really lacking that interaction.
That's it?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. It was a weird place to end, wasn't it? Like I thought he was going to keep going.
English is not his first language.
That's true.
So that kind of segues, into all this. So, the school year ended. You had the summer break, like typical. We all know, like you started the school year back in the virtual learning. I don't want to keep talking about that. I think we all kind of know what happened. Now you're back to school. Mm-hmm. It seemed, again, like not trying to turn this into a political conversation, but it seemed that people were either, if you were a parent or you're a teacher, and I'm trying to take myself out of this because I'll let you two talk about this more because my kids have been in school pretty much the whole time. Mm-hmm. But like you were either for going against it or you were not for it. And people had many reasons why. Like what, talk to me about the sort of stress surrounding going back. Like what were your thoughts?
And was I personally for going back?
You don't have to tell me like, I don't want you to get, expose anything, but I just want to know, your thoughts surrounding it,
Well, I personally was for going back, but I got vaccinated pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I wanted, and I was kind of sick. I have a relatively small home.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks, Quincy. And so.
Well, he could resell it now for a lot of money.
That's true.
I actually tried to pitch him on buying my house yesterday, but he wouldn't go for it.
So I was kind of sick of sharing space with my wife, who's a professor at a local university and also teaching from home. So I was really pumped about returning with a caveat of, well, is the school system going to dedicate resources to ensure we're all safe?
Right.
Which was my main kind of fear at the beginning of all this is like I keep going into school. I don't see any like cleaning protocols being instituted. I don't see, sanitizer everywhere. I don't see certain things being emphasized, which I felt like needed to be in order to keep us safe.
Do you think that they are doing a decent job now? Is everybody back? I know it's been a week or two, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was now I've only been back. I'm on spring break now. Literally last week was the first week I welcomed students back, and it was only the 9th graders.
Right.
So we had a week off there to like prep our room because no one had done anything with their room since the beginning of the school year. Like the rooms weren't ready for students. So we had some time to prep our room. It's like another transition because we went from normal learning to virtual learning to now what they're calling hybrid learning. Okay. So now it's like, okay, well, your lessons, and so there are more model lessons being rolled out to us. Watch this, get an idea. Right. Because now you're in class, and I'm engaging the students who are in the classroom in a normal way. Like I'll ask a question, right? I'm like, what's the dead load on this in, civil engineering class? And then I'll say, the students in class, I'm going to just have a discussion with. If you're at home, post to the chat. And then I might assign a student at home to be a chat monitor.
Gotcha.
To like kind of tell me what's going on in the chat. So now it's like a little bit of like here and there, and like trying to get the feel of that.
Interesting. Mark, what do you think from a parent's perspective about going back?
So again, my daughter's younger than what it sounds like you're teaching. I remember they sent out a survey early on, and my wife's a mental health therapist, so she got vaccinated early. But we were sort of going back and forth. We didn't have a clear. We wanted her to go back because, well, one, having her at home all the time severely limits how much real work that we can do, since my wife and I both work. But two, like, we understand the social interaction and everything, and while, you know, my daughter is doing well, it's not the same. Like, she's definitely struggling, and she has her moments where she's like, this sucks. You know, like, I'm not doing this. So we were going back and forth. Now that we're both vaccinated and like listening to the science and seeing that there are safety protocols that you can put in place, and the infection rate in schools has relatively been low. Like, we wrote back to that survey, yes, because I think they sent out the survey twice. The first time, I think we were okay with a hybrid. The second time, we're like, yes, we're okay with now full in person. But they're doing hybrid. She's going in 2 days a week.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, what's a hybrid system look like?
So it's like they're split into cohorts. Okay. So on Monday, the cohort A comes in Monday, Tuesday, and the rest of the week they're at home, so they're still virtual.
Okay.
Cohort B comes in Thursday, Friday, and the rest of the week they're at home, virtual. And cohort C are the students that either chose to stay home or their parents just, there was like a form that they had to fill out in order to bring them back, and so a lot of people don't bother to fill out the form, and so those students just stay virtual.
Do all your lessons run concurrently? So like like if somebody was in cohort, I don't know, B, but they miss a day, can they log on virtually and still have the same thing, like the same experience?
They were cohort B, but they missed
like, I know, like, in
day.
our school, like, there are a couple kids who go virtual, but our school made it very clear virtual is not there because, like, oh, we want to go knock off our 2-week vacation, and like, okay, so we're in this place for 2 weeks, our kids are just going to learn virtual. They're like, that's not why virtual school is there. So like, we can't do that. But for this virtual model, like, you don't have a separate lesson plan as you just described just for virtual learners, right? Okay.
No. Yeah. I have like, that same kind of format of like objectives, think about it, try it, learn it kind of thing.
Nice.
Yeah, and if they miss a day, then usually it's the same as if they miss a day anytime. We have, Wednesdays are async days, so we can actually meet with them and do what's called coach class, which is like office hours. So if they miss a day, they can either stay after class and talk with me, or, part of each lesson they're supposed to be async. That's another new term that's being used so much in education this year. So there's always async work where it's like I present something, do some examples, and I'm like, all right, you complete the rest of these problems, and I'll just mute myself, but I'll be here. And at that point, if a student needed some extra support on anything, we could always create like another chat room to meet in and just do like a little one-on-one time. That's
where I will say, and that in our house, that's where my daughter is thriving. She learns through teaching. So being virtual and just having like a talking head speak to her, sometimes it's over her head, sometimes she's not paying attention. But when she can meet with her teacher one-on-one and teach the lesson back, that's really where we're starting to see. So the asynchronous days, and her teacher's great. Like, she'll stay after on Fridays specifically to meet with our daughter and just make sure she's on par, because she knows that I'm sure certain kids are having a hard time just focusing. But that asynchronous learning is really where she's been, which I think is a great thing, and I hope they keep as we come back to some sort of normal, and I'm sure we'll eventually be back to class 5 days a week in person. Having something like that, like the traditional office hours, has been really helpful for us.
Yeah. Usually we do that after school in normal times. Yeah. Like, I would still have coach class. I'd just say, hey, come to my room after school. Make sure you get a ride home.
Nice. Yeah. How do you think your student performance is doing in general?
Yeah. So, I guess this kind of speaks to what's being reported in the media of like all this failure. You hear, more kids are failing than ever before. I haven't seen it.
Okay.
I taught the same course, Intro to Engineering Design, 3 sections of it in the fall. Oh, and the other big change this year is that we switched from like an all year long where I'm teaching 6 classes on like an A day, B day. So I would only see the same students every other day, but I'd see them the whole year. To we switched to the semester model. So I had like, all of a sudden I'm teaching the entire course from September to the end of January, which is very different time management wise. But those courses, I have great students, but to be honest, I don't know if that has as much to do with like the really high performance that I saw in the fall. I credit some of that to the change in the demographics of the course I'm teaching. Because when I first started teaching this Intro to Engineering Design, there were many more male students in it than female. But that's like been a push to get more girls involved in STEM. So as we've added more female students in, I find that, like personally, and this is just my own personal opinion, anecdotal evidence, but I find that they perform really well. Like they're just really good students.
When you say fall, you mean last fall?
Yeah, this was fall of 2020.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, that's interesting. So, I mean, you don't think that because of like the virtual environment, you know, you don't think, and this also, I'm assuming some of this might be different in maybe some of the more core subjects, English, math, things like that. You don't think there are more students falling behind?
I think that it does exacerbate students who would have been falling behind before.
Right.
So I teach this Foundations of Computer Science class, and that is a lot. There are a lot of students in there that have no interest in computer science, but you know, Maryland State Department of Ed has determined that everyone needs to take at least one tech ed credit to get a high school diploma now. So because of that, you have a lot of students who are forced to choose, and they choose computer science, and it's a lot of just sitting and coding, and they're not into that. And so those students who are in a class that they have really no interest in doing and they've been forced to take, they're falling behind, and they are difficult to, it's very difficult to reach them. It's very difficult to try to like reel them back in and re-engage them when all I'm seeing is like a blank screen with like a, you know, like a bunch of black squares.
Yeah, and you don't know if they're there, their mic is muted, there's no feedback.
Well, a lot of times I know they're not there because I go through and I do roll, like they appear and then I do roll, and then I'll be like, I'll stop mid period and say, oh, let me check in on some students, and I'll specifically call out some students, like radio silence.
Yeah. Interesting. And are you saying that those students typically would have been falling behind anyway?
Yeah, but it would have been, yes, I think so.
Okay.
I think it just exacerbates, it's harder for me to reach them. Like at least when they're in the classroom.
Okay. All right.
And all that other stuff that I was saying about building relationships, which is really a big part of teaching. Like if I could build those relationships in person in the classroom, then I could always joke around with them and get them to do some work.
Right.
But if they're just at home and they decide like, I don't care, I don't know why I'm in this class, like they don't, you know, or I could pull them aside in the classroom and have a private conversation and say, look, you just need to like do this amount to pass this to get your tech ed credit for graduation. But it's harder to have those kinds of conversations with someone who really doesn't want to engage at all in the virtual.
So are you grading any differently this year? Like is there any curve apply? Is there a COVID curve for any of this stuff?
Well, in the school system that I work for, they kind of are trying to have the lowest grade be like LS, which is low score, and that's 50%.
Gotcha.
So you can't really go much under 50%.
Sure.
So, but that was even before COVID started.
Yeah.
So, but that's a huge curve.
Right.
So, I mean, you really only have to do a limited amount of work
25% better
to get from 50 to 60 and pass a course.
Gotcha. We've talked about this before, going back to what you were just saying. So, you know, when you have a body of students that range from all different demographics, right? You know, socioeconomic, the way the family households are set up, you know, ethnic, race, all these different things. Like, in your just personal opinion, I know you're not an expert in this, like, how do you overcome this going into, let's assume by next year we're all back to normal? Like, how are we going to fill in the gaps for these kids? Like, the kid,
how do we overcome what?
Well,
you're saying, like, with
if
diversity?
You have a child that is, you know, socioeconomic speaking, you know, single parent, low wage earning, which I'm not classifying that as automatically they're going to fall behind, but historically speaking, they're probably the most at risk, you know, versus I mean, you know this as a teacher. You can have in the same school district a set of children that fall into that category and a set of children who, are nearing the top 1% of earners in the country, But how do we take that, the more at-risk population of students, how are we going to help them in the years to come?
Okay. So talking specifically about like low SES or students who are at risk of falling behind, and we're saying that they've fallen behind this year.
I mean, I don't.
So again, how do we make up that gap?
Yes, I'm making some assumptions, which I don't want to make, but I think throughout education, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
There's a more at-risk population that tends to suffer in general, and I can only imagine this exacerbates it.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. I mean, luckily, it's not really in my wheelhouse to solve that problem.
It's not, but how would you?
Summer school? Sorry to give a glib answer, but like something like.
I'm saying, like, would you go to year-round school? I'm a huge proponent of year-round school.
I wouldn't.
I think it's a great idea. I know you wouldn't.
I think they would lose. I think they would lose a lot of teachers if they went year-round. I mean, if they went year-round and there wasn't a commensurate bump in income, where they actually look at
a commensurate bump in time off.
What do you mean? Like instead of having the summer holiday, like having maybe like a 1 month winter break or something like that?
Yeah, I know some school systems that go year round. It's like, you go for a certain amount of time and you have 2 weeks off. Another certain amount of time and 2 weeks off. And you have a month break. And like when you look at it, you boil it down, you're like, oh, you actually have more time off than you did before. But the education is year round. So you don't,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would consider that.
Right.
I mean, a lot of things that have stopped year round in the past is just crumbling infrastructure in a lot of schools. I mean, if you're going to go through the summer, then schools need to be air conditioned, and we're in the 21st century, and there are a lot of schools that are not air conditioned.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a resources thing.
Right.
You got to get the money. You have to update your buildings.
Right.
And that money comes from taxes. In order to get that money, you got to raise taxes. That is not a very popular thing to do, right? So I kind of feel like if the resources are there and if people commit to that and they're willing to put the money into it, anything's possible.
Right.
So I just kind of want to piggyback on your question. As students are coming back, I would expect after the summer, you get a bit of a lapse where you're like relearning things that you learned the year prior. I know you've only been back a week and then we're on spring break now. Do you feel like that transition, is there one? Or because it's not a summer break you've been learning all year, has there been a period where you have to go back and just make sure they paid attention since September?
So are you talking about the transition now after spring break coming back?
Well, so I'm trying to remember now because everything's kind of a blur. I remember ending the year this year's been all virtual. Is that right? I'm trying to.
Yes.
Okay.
Up till now, yes.
So, and I know that sounds crazy me asking, but it's a whirlwind. So after a summer vacation, the kids aren't learning for 3 months or they're not continuing at the pace. You have to sort of reteach or catch them up again and just make sure their brains are ready to learn for the next year. We've been online this whole year. Kids are starting to come back now in person. Do you feel like there's that transition period where you have to sort of recode
as if we came
their
back
brain?
From summer break?
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
Are they looking this as starting school now?
Well, I did do a bunch of like first day type activities when they came in.
Sure.
And some of them were like, this is kind of, and I even addressed it. I'm like, this is normally something I do on the first day of school, but it was kind of like an icebreaker. And, that again, our guidelines are given to teachers a lot. We don't have as much freedom always. It depends which school you're at, I'm sure, but,
sure.
And your administrators, then the type of administrators you have. But, there were guidelines about, hey, do a little icebreaker activity. So in that way, it was similar to coming back. But both my classes were doing like research projects. So in the computer science class, they were making a choose your own adventure story using HTML and CSS. So do you remember those books where like you're reading and then you can flip to different?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they're making one of those just all web pages. And so we started that project in weeks prior, and then basically it like went into a nice seamless like, oh, okay, we're back in school, but you're finishing up your choose your own adventure.
Okay.
And then it's like Thursday was like, okay, now we're going to read each other's choose your own adventure and give some feedback on a discussion board. And in the other class, we were doing engineering careers research project. So they had to work on their PowerPoints earlier in the week, and then they presented at the end of the week.
Nice.
So it was
pretty seamless.
Yeah, it sounds like that. That's pretty cool.
But that has to do with what I teach a lot of and the way I plan.
Yeah. That's the one thing and maybe cynically I'll admit, but my daughter's grade goes back next week, so to Baltimore County. So when she goes back, I'm just worried. Okay, she'll be there for 2 weeks, and then we'll start learning, and then summer vacation again. I don't want to waste everything for the year, but it's nice hearing you say that they're thinking about this, they're prepared for it, and maybe it is subject specific more than like the general ed that the younger kids are getting. But it's something that we're thinking about as parents of public school kids is like, when they go back, is this going to be just a holding pattern until summer vacation, and then all of a sudden you're in the next grade?
Mm-hmm.
So.
What do you think like the long-term effects of like COVID on the education system is going to be? Do you think there will be any?
There could be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I think if I could hypothesize here, and I could give you like a George Orwell 1984 vision. I mean, it could be that I know that public school systems, and I'm sure researchers at universities who focus on education, since my wife's one, I know they're worried about the health of the public school system because a lot of people have transitioned to homeschooling over this period, and maybe they'll make the decision to continue homeschooling. And the whole model of the public school system is based on per pupil funding, right? So there's a number, and that's what the budget is. And if
less students tax the system a little less?
Less students would also be less money coming in and less resources.
Nobody's going to argue the public school system is overfunded.
No.
Okay.
But if you have less students, then you're not going to have the budget you need to hire more teachers to make smaller classes, right?
Sure, I see what you're saying. So I get like the average class size goes down to like 24 from 29. You think they would reduce the number of teachers in the public school system?
I think if you have less pupils, that's going to mean less teachers. And so that could be a long-term effect that people that now are getting their education, maybe they said they were thinking about private school, and then they said, well, this is a good time to check it out and try private school because they're still in person. They might stick with it and not come back to the public schools, or homeschool. They'll stick with that. So that could be an effect. Another big effect is going to be on the teachers themselves, because I have friends who are teachers in Georgia. My friend Kinte's an art teacher. Right. And then I know that another girl that we grew up with in New Jersey, she's teaching in Florida. And so I talk to them, and I know there are teachers deciding not to go back in person and deciding that they want to just either resign or retire.
Right. Wow.
And so there could be a crisis due to teacher shortage, moving forward, because I don't know what the numbers are coming out of colleges with like teacher preparation schools. Like I don't know how many teachers Towson University is graduating every year.
Right.
So I would have to know that in order to make this statement, really. But it seems to me, as someone who's been inside, and if you look at the research around schools, teacher retention, or another way of looking at teacher attrition, is really high. Like on average, most teachers stay in the field of education 3 to 5 years. So think about that. Right. I mean, like a kid comes into 9th grade, by the time 12th grade comes, already like we've lost probably 20 teachers over the 4 years when, that student was just in high school.
Right.
It puts a stress on the system, right? I mean, stability is a key, and having good, highly qualified teachers who stick it out and want to stay and remain in the profession is better for everybody.
Right. Interesting.
So that could be a long-term problem.
Do you have any insight into how college acceptance is going to have to change? I'm assuming the juniors and seniors who lived through this, their college admissions process was completely different than what they thought it was going to be. Do you see that remaining an issue, or are we going back to SAT and ACT and the standard?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, I'm not really an expert on this, but what I do hear is that schools are transitioning away. Even before COVID came, that schools, universities, by schools I mean universities and colleges, right, are transitioning away from focusing on SAT and ACT as much. I mean, if you think about it, and this is maybe my kind of jaded opinion, but it's big business now, universities, and student loans is a big thing. And there are all these companies that are making money off of people going to school. And if someone wants to take out $90,000 to $120,000 to get a bachelor's degree in fine art, then the school will happily take their money. And what does it care what their ACT or SAT is?
Sure.
I mean, that might be a little bit of a jaded view.
It makes sense.
Right.
In the end, it's like that's their clientele now, right? They want to give the student loans out and let the kids pay whatever they're going to pay and take on however much debt they want.
Right.
I think they are what I'm hearing, back to your original point, is that they are transitioning away from those standardized testing. I don't know. I think GPA is still pretty important, especially at a lot of schools. Like if you look at the educational researchers and they're putting it out, I mean, it's still like if you want to go to a University of Maryland, there is a threshold of like GPA. There is a base threshold that they want students to score on in the SATs or the ACTs. Did I answer your question?
I think so, yeah. Okay. So they were trending away from maybe what we all went through to get into school anyway. But going back to the theme I'm picking up in this is we were heading in a direction, but COVID really enhanced the speed at which we're getting there. Mm-hmm. So even though we were heading to maybe more person-centered application, right? Extracurriculars versus like, you know, your school offers 15 APs. Why'd you only take 3? So this just made it a little faster to get there to the end of the road. So, I mean, it's exciting to see where we can go in education. And to be honest, like my wife and I, we've had some of these conversations that you were talking about. Our kids are early enough in her education process. Like, is this the best way forward? What do we do? Is private school an option? Is homeschooling an option? Mm-hmm. How is that going to affect which one of us has to not work as much? So these conversations are happening, and it all revolves around the comfort level, I think, and how we feel the schools are prepared. And it sounds like they're going in the right direction, which is nice to hear.
Do you think that the public school system, I mean, obviously this is not, like you said before, this is not a problem that falls on your shoulders, but do you think that they're having conversations about the long-term effects of the students through this?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's been a lot of, I have to say that I'm happy with my public school systems and the level of communication they've put out. If anything, there's been more. I get a phone call from them every night, almost. Sometimes it feels like, and I'm like, oh, they're calling again, and they just send out these robocalls, and
sometimes twice a night.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, okay, it's the school system again.
Saying what?
So they'll say, oh, just so you know, like spring athletic season is starting up, or just so you know, if you want your student to return to in-person education, there's a form on our new hub. You know, I think that the communication has been good from the public school system. What was your original question, though?
I'm just trying to see, like, gauge your sort of like thoughts and feelings on what you think I'm going to use the word administration, like their discussions on the long-term effects of the students throughout like this whole COVID process.
No, I think they're definitely like thinking about that. I mean, just in the guidelines to add more SEL into our lessons, to have more social emotional learning, to focus on like emotional, intelligence type things. I think that is a reflection of the schools thinking about that. I mean, perhaps that's why they push to bring everyone back now. Because, some people are asking, well, there are only a couple months left.
Right, why?
Like the data coming in is that we're doing better, and I definitely feel good about the increase in the rates of vaccination and how that's going up. But then the numbers are still just as high, if not higher, than they were at the time last year when they decided to shut down. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of questioning, well, why now? And maybe the schools are thinking, well, it's better not to wait till the summer and for a whole summer to go by and then try to like reintegrate everyone. Maybe this is like our test run of like, let's just get back in for a couple months and work out all the kinks in our systems, like make sure that we set up systems and then we run the systems and then see if there's anything over the summer that needs to be like redesigned a little bit.
Can you, I know you don't know this. Can you hold anybody back this year? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there any way to objectively say, like, oh, you're not smart enough to move to the next grade?
That's a good question. Like, how do you, like, is there an objective way during COVID to fail a student?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
You just get a stamp of approval. Like,
Right.
you're
Right.
go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get you
Right.
next year.
Like, are we all just trying to, like cope and maintain, like, a certain status quo this year? Or are you out there, like, objectively assigning, you know, this person is accelerating, this person is failing? Like, are you able to do that this year? Is that even something that you want to do this year?
So I agree with you that we're all just coping,
Right.
and this is all uncharted waters. So a lot of what we do, and I say this to my students, and you expressed earlier that your daughter's like, this sucks sometimes, and I say that to my students. I'm like, look, it's okay to feel that way. Like, this does suck. This is not normal. We're all going through this together. And I try to take, you know, having friends around the world, I try to take comfort in the knowledge that it's not just here, it's not just happening to us in this one geographic spot, but it's a global thing. So if you realize that this is happening to everyone all around the world, they're all dealing with the same problems. Even the Austrian public school system, you know, in Vienna public city schools, they're trying to figure out their methods. So, yes, we're all just trying to cope. Now, the question about are some students still accelerating and some behind? There are definitely students who are thriving and doing great. Like, I have a student in my computer science class who's already been doing computer science on their own for 3 years, and that student comes in regularly and, like, teaches me something new along with all the other students. So students like that are just an asset, and that person has probably seen no, like they've seen continued growth.
Right.
They haven't been held back at all.
No hiccup at all through COVID.
There are students who I think are showing some major losses.
Right.
Are they going to be held back? Again, that goes back to the policies of the administrators and stuff. And just an observation, in my opinion, is even before this, we weren't holding a lot of students back.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like, all right, let's get these students the credits that they need. Let's throw them into the classes. Freshman year has been shown in research to be a very pivotal year, 9th grade. And so getting students to get as many of the credits as they need in high school in order to get, like, the diploma, which I think is like 21 credits, that freshman year is a big thing. But I don't see a lot of, it seems to me that if I think back on my high school experience and this one today, that in general, the kids are held to a lower standard than what I was.
Right.
Like, even just like if I got a zero was a zero.
Right.
And there was no, like, redo opportunity. There was no, like, well, this student comes to class regularly and they're paying attention and maybe they just perform poorly on that, so they get an LS, which is 50%. So, I mean, that would have really bumped my GPA nicely
totally.
if everything was a 50% instead of a zero.
I mean, why? Like, what is the what is the point of not? We're getting off what we originally started talking about. What is the point of not being able to assign a zero and being able to assign a 50%? I guess I'm looking at, like, if I'm hiring somebody,
yeah,
and I'm basing it off of class scores, and I see somebody who has a score of 50% on average or a score of 0, to me it's the same, right? Like, I would never
failed.
Yeah, like, I would never see. So what's the point? Like, why institute a policy like that?
Well, I guess they're thinking that, and I don't know completely. Like,
right, I know.
This just comes down from above, and I implement
just
it.
a teacher. I get that. So I know I'm asking questions.
But yeah, make sure you show that air quotes, because we don't want anybody thinking like he's just teachers, like they don't do anything.
Teachers make the world go round.
That was nice. That was a little PSA.
That was
we'll put, like, the more you know rainbow coming across there.
You
the more
quote
you know.
Lamar, what's his name? Lamar Jackson?
Is it LeVar Burton?
There we go.
Lamar Jackson is the quarterback.
That was mildly racist. You quote him a lot. Yeah.
He was pivotal on my
Just take
education.
a book. Take a look. It's in a book.
It's Reading Rainbow.
The Reading Rainbow. Reading Rainbow. You never saw Reading Rainbow?
I did.
Okay.
I grew up on it. I just couldn't remember the dude's name.
Okay.
Lamar Jackson.
Close enough.
He's also playing football.
Go. So the 50% question.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they implemented that policy, but a lot of What I hear from the educational researchers, again, mostly my wife, when I talk to her about this.
Should have just had his wife on the show.
No,
yeah, you should have had her. Is if you think about it, I mean, from a 50 to 100, right? That's 10% intervals, gaps. Mm-hmm. So if you fail, then from failing to a D is 10%. If 0 is the lowest, then from a 0 to a D is 60%. So I guess they're saying it's more equitable. I'm just giving you the argument that I've heard.
But that argument makes zero sense, though.
Yeah. So you're saying they should reinstitute the 0?
No, I'm not. It's not my problem to worry about.
Okay.
It's not his problem to worry about either. He's just a teacher.
I know, but he's issuing 50%.
Air quotes.
I'm trying to figure out why. I'm just curious. That's all. I'm just curious.
What? Well, the answer
why
I'm doing
all the
it
kids
is
soft
because
nowadays is what
the
I'm asking.
system asks me to do it. The system's like, this is where we're moving.
Yeah.
And, equity is a big keyword. That's a word that we hear a lot.
Yeah.
Equity.
No, I mean,
do you hear about that?
Yeah.
They talk about equity is, giving people what they need in order to reach. Maybe not everybody's going to reach the highest apple on the tree, but they want everyone to be able to reach an apple. Mm-hmm. So I think that if you had a school system representative here, not that I am one, they would probably say, well, it falls in with our equity policies. I think that's what they would say.
What are you trying to do, man?
Nothing. I'm just getting the giggles out, Yeah.
What do you feel about, I guess my question is, how would you grade the public school system on, just what they've done this year with lessons and communication and all that? And then the follow-up question to that would be, what's one thing that you would have liked, or you would like the public school to do more of, or how could they do something better?
I would say you should ask my wife that question too. So we should just have our wives talk. No, she's just better at this than I am. I will say that what?
I want to hear your answer.
Why are you leaning in?
I want to hear your answer.
Make me nervous. Grinch, back up, man.
Grinch?
Yeah.
A green?
No, you smile like the Grinch. Look at my watch band. Take 2.
You already got. I saw him switch over to the camera anyway.
I will say that we've been extremely lucky with the 2 teachers that my daughter has had throughout this, from 2nd grade into 3rd grade. I don't know that I can comment on the school system as a whole, but our 2 teachers have been amazing. Mm-hmm. They pivoted quickly. They are just so curious about how their students are doing, and that really does come through. Again, it's a younger group of kids, so the person-centered stuff is probably easier than 10th and 11th graders. But checking in and doing like a personalized greeting every day. How do you want to say hi today? And that just gets them excited for learning. So our teachers have been awesome. The school system calls a lot. Yeah, I will say they could call less. I don't care about the sports schedule. My kids 8. So, but I don't think I'm qualified to talk about the school system in general. And I know I'm not trying to give a cop-out answer, but it's really shown how lucky we've been to have 2 awesome teachers. Yeah. And I think that's really what we're most thankful for through this, is because it's tough for the parents at home too. I'm not a teacher. So being able to send them an email. This is what's happening at home. How would you handle this? And a quick response with detailed, this is what I see. It's funny, I'm not seeing that in school. What you're describing at home, I'll pay attention to it. The communication between our teacher and the parent has been amazing. So, having kids with a quality teacher, I think, is the only reason why we feel comfortable sending her back and knowing that she will be prepared for next year. But if you didn't have that, which I don't know what you would do. You can't fire a teacher because they're not good at teaching virtually. So it's a tough situation that the school system's in. And I think we did try to give them a wide area of...
like a wide berth.
Yeah, exactly. But
nice boating term.
It was nice. I know I danced around your question. I can't answer for the school system, but for us, the one thing that we are very thankful for is the quality of the teachers that have been involved.
I think that's important. The high quality teacher, that's what they say makes the difference.
Yeah.
Even if your student has a bad teacher for 1 year, the research shows that doesn't necessarily affect them over the long term, as long as the following year they have a good teacher.
I definitely think a good teacher along the line can make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
A bad teacher might not be memorable.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to, they may not have zero effect on anything, but a good teacher can definitely change things.
Oh, definitely.
I have one last question, and we'll let you go.
Sure.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this as long as I've known you. Tell me the grade levels, like the range. You've taught all over the place, haven't you?
Like in my whole life?
Your entire teaching career.
Yeah,
grade range.
I've taught from the cradle to the grave, because I've taught
pretty
much everyone.
Adults,
I used to teach adults when I was living in Hungary and teaching English as a foreign language.
You used to teach it here too, right? Didn't you teach?
Oh yeah, I taught at CCBC.
Yeah.
I've been an adjunct at most of the local area at Howard County Community College.
What's been your favorite grade or range?
I like this. I like what I'm doing now.
You like this because of the subject? You like this because of the age range?
Both.
Really?
I like
High school
9th
kids are
to 12th
horrible.
graders. You'd be surprised.
No, I used to be one.
Yeah, I used to be one too. And yes, they have they have a tendency to, not always stay within the realm of the truth. But for the most part, I'm actually pretty impressed with these students.
The most eloquent
really good.
way of calling somebody a liar.
You should be a spokesperson for the school system. You've done a good job.
Thanks.
We'll put it in your title that you are a spokesperson.
Thank you.
Right.
I have to say, I think that is what keeps me doing it year after year, is that I'm impressed by these students. And every year, some of them come in. It seems like more and more of them come in with more and more skills. Like they're getting into their interests earlier. Mm-hmm. And because of, it depends what the interest is, but they're able to explore it at a deeper level. Like a student that came in that's coding this year who's already had 3 years of experience in summer camps at JHU and coding. And this student has so much knowledge that by the time they go to college, they'll be really ready for a comp sci degree if they choose to go that way. Right. And then they'll come out with a great career.
Nice.
Yeah. A guaranteed job, because that's one of the fields that is skyrocketing.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, man. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for your
it's
time.
Been a nice conversation. I enjoyed it.
No, I think learned a lot.
Enjoy your spring break.
I will.
See you.
See ya.
Bye.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast.
Fucking Mike Tyson.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast.
Make sure you follow us on social media. Check us out on searchbmore.com and subscribe to the podcast. And all future content is available to you.
Yes.
If you subscribe.
Perfect.
Do it.
Thank you. Good
See
job.
ya.
Bye.